LTS story of the week, the betrayal. So there's this guy, his name is Shamar. Now Shamar is a truck driver, just your everyday hard-working man, always on the road and doing what he has to do to make a living. And so one day, like any other day, Shamar gets hungry, so he decides to pull over and stop off at the local Denny's. And so Shamar goes in, he finds a seat and starts going through the menu. And that's when he notices an older gentleman on the other side of the restaurant. Now we never hear his actual name, so for this video we'll call him Robert. Now Robert was sitting there surrounded by family and friends, all gathered around to celebrate a huge milestone, his 89th birthday. Now at some point during the meal, Shamar has to use the restroom, but before he does, he stops off at Robert's table to wish him a happy birthday. Now when Shamar is returning back to his table, he notices that Robert, who's now sitting by himself, is calling him over. Now Shamar was confused because he didn't know this man, but out of respect he walks over. And after a brief discussion, Robert then confesses to Shamar that he has many life regrets, in which Shamar says that he can understand that. But then Robert says, "You have no idea," and then proceeds to tell Shamar a story that would change the way that he looks at life. Now, Robert's story takes us back to the 1960s, during a time where the racial divide in America was at an all-time high, where segregation and police brutality was the norm, due to generations worth of hatred woven deep into the culture. And even though the Civil Rights Act would be signed in the year 1964, making discrimination illegal, the law hadn't changed everyone's hearts, and that included people like Robert, who during this time had a job that he loved, being a firefighter. He ironically believed that he was making a difference in the world. But even though that was the case, and even though Robert had taken an oath as a firefighter to serve his community, Robert had continued the traditions of what he claims that some firefighters of that time did, that I call the out of reach, which meant that when Robert pulled up to a fire, if he heard someone on the inside screaming for help, he would run in. But the moment that he realized that the person was African American, he would turn right back around and walk away. And then later on his reports, he would say that the person was too far out of reach. And he admits that this was not just a one-time thing, but that he did again and again and again, ignoring the cries of African Americans and burning homes, cars, and businesses, just leaving them there to die. And this went on for over a decade until his last victim, a black baby. Robert had ran in to save it, and just like all the others, when he saw who it was, he walked away. But this time was different. He suddenly had internal conviction of what he did. He couldn't do the job anymore. And so in that very same year, Robert resigned. He never worked as a firefighter again. He was never charged, never held accountable, but sadly in that time and place he likely would have gotten away with it anyway. But what he couldn't get away from were the screams, the cries, the guilt. A guilt that followed Robert the rest of his life. And so once Robert was done, Shamar just stood there speechless. He didn't know what to say. So he just says happy birthday again and walks away. And then he goes on TikTok and tells the world what he was just told. Robert's story is a reminder to all of us that sin is sin. That it doesn't matter what year it is or what culture and society says. And it doesn't matter what's normal. There are things that we know are right and things that we know are wrong, because God has placed His truth deep in our hearts, which is why when we hear stories like Robert's, it shakes us, because we know deep down inside that it's outrageous, that it's an evil. You see, every sin and bad thing that we do begins as a thought, and if you allow that thought to take root in your heart, it spreads like a virus. It taints everything that you do, and before long, it separates you from your Savior. Robert accepted a lie, and that lie cost people their lives. And that's exactly why the Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 4, verses 23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. We all need to be honest with ourselves and ask the question, is there a sin in our lives that we've normalized, something we've excused or justified? Jesus is calling all of us out of that lie, not with shame, but with redemption. Don't allow for guilt to define your future like it did Robert's. Let grace do that instead. Until next time, be blessed and always put Jesus first.